The first time my trauma made it to the table, it happened by accident. At least, that's what I told myself. We were eating spaghetti. I remember because the sauce splattered onto the white tablecloth my mom only used for real dinners. My fork was halfway to my mouth when my Aunt Denise said, "So, how's therapy going?" The table went quiet in that way that isn't quiet at all. It buzzed. I froze. What? I said, heat crawling up my neck. "Oh, come on," Denise said lightly. "Your mom told me. About, everything." Everything. That word again. My mom shot me a look, not apologetic, just warning. The look that said, "Don't make this weird." "It's fine," my mom said quickly. "I just mentioned it in passing. We're family." Family. Another word that did too much work. I nodded. My hands were shaking under the table. I tried to focus on the smell of garlic, the scrape of Mark's chair, anything that wasn't the sudden realization that something private had slipped out of my control. "And?" Denise pressed. "Do you feel better talking about it?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "You weren't supposed to know." I wanted to ask who else did. Instead, I said, "Yeah, it helps," because honesty had never helped me before. After that, it became normal. Normal for my panic attacks to be referenced casually. Normal for my past relationship to be summarized in neat, bite-sized jokes. Normal for my worst moments to be reduced to anecdotes that filled awkward silences between courses. "Remember when she couldn't even drive on the freeway?" Mark laughed once, shaking his head. "We thought she'd never be independent." "I still don't," my dad muttered, not unkindly. "She worries too much." They weren't cruel. That's the thing people don't understand. They weren't monsters. They just didn't see me as someone who deserved ownership over my own pain. Every time I tried to redirect the conversation, it slid back to me, my reactions, my emotions, my fragility. "She's working on it," my mom would say, proudly, like I was a project. "She's come a long way." From what? Surviving things she talked about like weather updates? I started dreading meals, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, tight-chested way, the kind where you rehearse neutral expressions in the mirror and remind yourself not to flinch. I told myself it was love, concern, curiosity. That's what they said it was. "You're so private," Denise teased. "We just want to understand you." But understanding was never the goal. Entertainment was. I realized it one night when I went to refill my water and overheard my mom talking in the kitchen. "She's better than she was, but you know how she is, always carrying things." "And she doesn't mind you sharing?" Denise asked. My mom laughed softly. "She doesn't say anything." No, I didn't. Because every time I opened my mouth, I felt 12 years old again, standing in a doorway, deciding whether my feelings were worth the fallout. Back at the table, my plate was cold, my appetite gone. The conversation rolled on without me, my story told in fragments by people who had never asked how it felt to live inside it. I smiled when they looked at me. I swallowed when they didn't. And somewhere between dessert and coffee, a thought flickered through me for the first time, quiet but dangerous. They don't protect me. They never have. They just pass me around.
When my pain became their entertainment. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people never get when I try to explain it later. There wasn't a single moment where someone stood up, pointed at me, and said, "Let's use her trauma for fun." It crept, it slid, it settled in like something everyone pretended not to notice. At first, it was just family. Then it wasn't. The first time I realized my story had traveled further than our dining room was at my cousin Rachel's birthday party. Loud house, too many people, music thumping through walls that had probably heard worse secrets than mine. I was halfway through a plastic cup of warm wine when a woman I barely knew leaned in and said, "So, I heard you've been through a lot." I blinked. Sorry? She smiled, sympathetic in that rehearsed way. "Your aunt told me about your anxiety and the breakup. That sounded rough." My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical. "Oh," I said. That was all I could manage. She patted my arm like she was comforting a child. "You're so brave." Brave. I spent the rest of the night in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub, breathing through the kind of panic that makes your fingers tingle. I stared at the chipped nail polish on my toes and tried to figure out how a life could unravel without you noticing the threads slipping. When I brought it up to my mom later, she sighed like I'd asked for too much. She was just being nice, my mom said. People care. About me? I asked quietly, or about the story? My mom frowned. Why are you making this into something ugly? That question became her favorite. Every time I tried to name the discomfort, it was turned back on me like a mirror angled wrong. Why are you so sensitive? Why do you assume the worst? Why can't you take concern as concern? I started doubting myself. Maybe this was normal. Maybe families talked. Maybe privacy was something I was supposed to outgrow, like shyness or braces. But then the jokes started getting sharper. At Thanksgiving, Mark raised his glass and said, "To my sister, who survived her 20s and lived to tell the tale." Everyone laughed. I felt heat rush to my face. Can you not? Relax, he said. I didn't say anything. That was his thing. He never said anything specific. He let implication do the work. Later, as we passed the mashed potatoes, my Aunt Denise leaned toward a new boyfriend of hers and said, "Very emotional. You have to be gentle with her." I stared at my plate. The potatoes looked gluey. I couldn't swallow. Emotional, fragile, sensitive. They were carving my identity out of my worst moments and serving it up like trivia. I tried setting boundaries. I really did. "Please don't talk about my therapy," I said one afternoon, standing in my parents' kitchen. My mom was chopping onions. The smell burned my eyes, which didn't help. She paused. "I don't see why it's such a big deal." "It's private," I said. My voice shook. I hated that it always shook. She turned to look at me, knife still in her hand. "You act like we're telling strangers your secrets." "I am," I said. Her mouth tightened. "You're being dramatic." That word hit me harder than anything else. Dramatic. The family's favorite way to dismiss discomfort without addressing it. After that conversation, things shifted, subtly, coldly. I stopped being included in small plans. I found out about dinners after they happened. Group chats went quiet when I entered them. The punishment wasn't loud, it was absence. And then, when I was finally invited again, I noticed something else. They talked about me like I wasn't there. "She's better now," my mom told my cousin across the table once. "We were worried for a while." "Yeah," Mark added, "she was kind of a mess." I stared at my napkin, folded it and unfolded it until the edges frayed. No one asked how I felt about being summarized like a recovery story everyone else owned. No one noticed my silence. Or maybe they did, and that was the point. The worst part wasn't that they talked, it was how they talked, not with cruelty, but with ease, like my pain was light enough to toss around, like it belonged to the room, not to me. I started watching them more closely after that. The glances, the way conversations shifted when someone new arrived, how my name became a setup for a laugh, a lesson, a warning. "She's strong," my mom would say, "but you know, she struggles." They loved that sentence. It made them sound compassionate. It made them sound involved. It made them sound like they were helping. I stopped correcting them. I stopped offering details. I started giving vague answers and tight smiles. And still, somehow, the story kept growing. I found out later that my aunt had been telling people about my panic attacks at her book club, that my mom had shared details about my therapy breakthroughs with neighbors, that Mark had joked about my meltdowns at work parties. I found this out in pieces, through offhand comments, through awkward apologies from people who shouldn't have known anything at all. Every discovery felt like a small betrayal stacked on top of the last. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't articulate, like my skin was thinner than everyone else's, like I couldn't protect myself from being seen wrong. I started dreading gatherings not because of conflict, but because of performance. I never knew when I'd be brought up, or how. I never knew what version of me they were telling. And the hardest part, they still hugged me goodbye. They still asked how work was. They still said, "We love you," which made me feel insane for feeling hurt. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked unevenly. I thought about how much of myself I had given them, how many details, how much trust, and I realized something that made my chest ache. They didn't earn my openness, they consumed it. The flashbacks started coming after that. Little moments from childhood I'd never examined. My mom telling a neighbor about my crush while I was standing right there. My aunt repeating something I begged her not to share. Mark mocking me for crying, then retelling it later like a funny story. I had learned early that my feelings weren't sacred, they were communal property. One Sunday, after a particularly brutal dinner where my past was brought up 3 separate times, I sat in my car and cried until my throat hurt. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt hollow, like something essential had been taken and I didn't know how to get it back. That's when the confusion started turning into something darker. Clarity. I started asking myself questions I'd avoided for years. Why was I the only one expected to be understanding? Why did concern always cost my dignity? Why did love feel like exposure? The answers scared me because they pointed to a truth I wasn't ready to face. My family didn't see my boundaries as real. They saw them as inconveniences. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Not when every laugh echoes a little too long. Not when every "we're just worried" sounds rehearsed. Not when your pain has become their favorite story to tell. By the time I realized how deep it went, something inside me had already started pulling away. Quietly, carefully, like someone packing a bag in the dark.
The night I finally heard the laughter clearly. The breaking point didn't feel dramatic when it arrived. No screaming, no plates shattering, no one storming out. It came quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep inside me. It was my mom's birthday, 62. She wanted a small thing, which in our family meant 12 people, catered food, and a seating arrangement that put me directly across from her, like a reminder she could still see me. I almost didn't go. That should have told me everything, but guilt has a loud voice when you've been trained to listen to it, so I went. I put on a soft sweater, I practiced neutral expressions in the mirror, I told myself I'd stay an hour, 2 max. The house smelled like roast chicken and lemon cleaner. The living room was full of chatter, overlapping conversations that rose and fell like waves. People hugged me, asked how I was doing, said things like, "You look good," which I'd learned meant, "You look manageable." Dinner was set early. We sat at the table, the same oak one dragged out from the dining room into the larger space so everyone could fit. The hum of the overhead light was louder than I remembered. I focused on small things. The way my fork felt heavier than usual, the sound of wine being poured, the pressure in my chest I couldn't quite breathe through. It started harmlessly. "So," my Aunt Denise said, smiling brightly at one of my mom's coworkers, "she's the sensitive one, right?" She gestured at me with her glass. I felt the familiar tightening, but I didn't react. I stared at my plate. "Oh?" the coworker said, interested. "She's had a rough few years. Anxiety, a bad breakup, therapy, and all that." There it was. My mom laughed softly. "She's doing so much better now." Mark chimed in. "Yeah, she used to call me crying at like 2 in the morning. He laughed like it was a cute memory." I looked up then. "Can we not?" I said. My voice was calmed. Too calm. It surprised even me. The table paused for half a second. "What not?" my mom asked, eyebrows lifting. "Talk about me like this," I said. "Please." Denise tilted her head. "We're not saying anything bad." "I didn't say you were," I replied. Mark shrugged. "You're acting like we're trashing you." "I'm asking you to stop." My hands were shaking now, visible on the table. I hated that. I hated giving them that. My mom sighed, loudly. "This is supposed to be a nice night." "I know. That's why I'm asking quietly." Silence fell. And then, laughter. Not loud, not cruel. Uncomfortable, dismissive. Denise chuckled. "You're still working through things, huh?" That was when something in me finally cracked. Not anger, understanding. They didn't hear me. They never had. I pushed my chair back slightly, the legs scraping against the floor. The sound was sharp, too loud in the moment. Everyone looked at me. "I'm going to step outside," I said. My mom frowned. "Don't be dramatic."
I didn't respond. I walked toward the back hallway, my heart pounding so hard it made my ears ring. I stopped when I heard voices behind me. Not whispers, not careful, comfortable. "She's doing it again," Denise said. "I told you this would happen," Mark replied. "She always makes it about herself," my mom said. Her voice was tired, annoyed. "I don't know why she can't just let things go." I stood there, frozen. They thought I was gone. "She uses this stuff for attention," Denise continued. "I mean, how long ago was all that? I think she likes the identity, being the fragile one." My mom sighed. "She's always been like this." That sentence landed harder than anything else. Always. Not hurt, not mistreated. Like this. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. The paint felt cold, slightly rough. I waited for someone, anyone, to say something different. No one did. The room behind them filled with laughter again. Plates clanked, someone poured more wine. I stepped outside into the backyard. The night air hit me like a shock. Cold, clean, real. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, staring at the dark outline of the fence. My breath came out in short bursts. My body wanted to cry, to shake, to collapse. But my mind was strangely still. I replayed the conversation in my head, not with the usual doubt, but with clarity. They didn't misunderstand me. They judged me. They reduced me. They decided who I was without asking if it was true. And worse, they enjoyed the role they gave me. I went back inside 10 minutes later. No one noticed right away. When they did, my mom smiled too brightly. "There you are." I didn't sit down. "I heard you," I said. The room quieted. "Heard what?" Denise asked, already defensive. "What you said. About me, in the hallway." My mom's face changed. Not guilt, calculation. "You shouldn't eavesdrop." That was it. That was the moment. No apology, no denial. Just correction. I nodded slowly. "Okay." Mark laughed awkwardly. "Come on, you're taking this too seriously." "I'm not. I'm taking it accurately." My mom stood. "This is not the time." "No," I agreed. "It's the end." Silence. I looked at each of them, really looked. At Denise's pursed lips, at Mark's crossed arms, at my mom's tight jaw. They looked annoyed, not remorseful. "I don't feel safe sharing my life with you anymore." My voice was steady. It didn't feel like mine, but it didn't shake. "You don't respect me." "That's not fair," my mom said quickly. "It is," I replied, "and I'm done pretending it's not." I picked up my coat. My mom followed me to the door. "You're overreacting." I paused, hand on the knob. "No," I said, "I'm taking it accurately." Then I left. I cried in my car, hard, the kind of crying that hurts your ribs. But underneath it, there was something else. Relief. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. I didn't announce no contact after that. I didn't make a speech. I just stopped reaching out. I stopped answering calls. I stopped explaining myself. At first, the messages were confused, then irritated, then concerned. "You can't cut us off like this," my mom texted. "We're worried," Denise wrote. "Grow up," Mark said. I read them all. I didn't reply, because for the first time in my life, I understood something clearly and completely. They didn't lose me because I was sensitive. They lost me because they never listened. And once you see your family clearly, there's no unseeing them, only choosing what you do next.
The cost of losing access. No contact doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in waves. The first few weeks felt unreal, like I was waiting for someone to burst through the quiet and tell me this had all been a misunderstanding. My phone stayed face down on the counter. Every vibration made my chest tighten. Every silence felt suspicious. I grieved them before they were fully gone. Not the people they were, but the family I'd believed I had. Holidays came next. Thanksgiving was the hardest. I stood in the grocery store staring at a wall of cranberry sauce, realizing no one would text me asking what time I was coming. No passive-aggressive, "Are you alive?" from my mom. No group chat memes. No obligation to show up and shrink myself. I cooked for myself that year. Burned the turkey a little, laughed out loud in my empty kitchen, cried while washing dishes. Both things were true. The messages kept coming for a while. Long ones from my mom, full of confusion and concern that never quite reached accountability. "We miss you. We don't understand what we did. This is hurting the whole family." Short ones from Mark. "You're being extreme. You'll regret this." Denise sent an apology once, not to me, but about herself. "I'm sorry if anything I said came across wrong." I never replied. not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that explaining myself again would just be another performance, another chance for them to twist my words, minimize my pain, or retell the story with me as the problem. Silence, I learned, was the only boundary they couldn't step over. The first real piece came unexpectedly. It was a random Tuesday night. I was folding laundry, half watching a dumb show, when I realized something startling. My chest didn't feel tight. No anticipation, no rehearsed conversations, no fear of being misunderstood. I felt neutral. And neutral felt like freedom. Months passed. Then came the consequences. I heard about them indirectly through the few relatives who still spoke to me quietly, carefully. My mom struggled with the silence. She tried to fill it by talking about me to anyone who would listen, but without me there to react, the stories fell flat. People started asking questions. Why won't she talk to you? What happened? Did you say something? My mom hated those questions. She hated not having access to me more. Mark stopped laughing so much at gatherings. Without me there, his jokes had no easy target. His stories lacked a centerpiece. Denise lost her favorite narrative, the wounded niece she could use to sound compassionate. And then life kept happening. My birthday passed. I turned off my phone and spent the day with friends who knew how to sit with silence without filling it with my pain. People who asked permission before sharing stories that weren't theirs. My dad tried calling once. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded older, tired. I don't know what went wrong, but your mom's not doing well. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because the truth was, I hadn't gone no contact to punish them. I did it to save myself. The real karma didn't arrive in a dramatic confrontation or a public exposure. It arrived quietly, in the empty seat at holidays, in the absence of updates about my life, in the way my name slowly stopped being mentioned because there was nothing new to say. No fresh stories, no reactions, no access. They couldn't gossip about what they didn't know, and that drove them crazy. A year after I left, my mom sent one last message. It was short. I wish you'd just talk to us. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed and erased about a dozen responses. Finally, I wrote nothing. I set the phone down, went for a walk. The air was cool. The streetlights buzzed softly. Somewhere nearby, someone was laughing. Not at anyone's expense, just laughing. I realized then how much I'd grown, how strong I'd become without performing resilience for people who fed on my vulnerability. They used to say I was fragile. They were wrong. I had just been unprotected. Now I was untouchable, because the greatest revenge I could give them wasn't anger or confrontation or explanations they'd never hear. It was a life they no longer had access to, and they realized, too late, that what they treated as dinner conversation was actually my trust. Once gone, it never came back. I didn't disappear. I chose myself. And for the first time, that choice was enough.